Okay, it's 6 p.m., so we will call the Newburgh Dundee Public Schools Budget Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is to elect the Budget Committee officers. So the first thing is to elect a chair for this year's Budget Committee. Are there any nominations for chairperson?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Claire Hertz for chair.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Okay, are there other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Kat.
Okay, McNeil, is there a second to that nomination?
I second.
Okay, so we have two people to be chairperson. Are there other nominations? Okay, if not, then I guess we would take a vote. How many people are in favor of Claire Hertz being the chairperson for the Budget Committee? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. Okay. All those in favor of Kat McNeil being in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So that anybody opposed? Okay. So the majority is for Kat to be the Budget Committee. And so Kat, I'll turn it over to you. And the next item will be that you will choose a vice chair. Can you make sure your mic is pointed towards you and on?
Right now, we'll open up the nomination for vice chair.
I nominate Claire Hertz as vice chair.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Any other nominations for vice chair? All right, all those in favor of Claire Hertz for vice chair? Opposed? Abstaining. Claire Hertz is vice chair. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to Heather for present budget. Sorry, Dr. Phillips for budget message.
Thank you. The 2024-2025 Superintendent's budget message, May 7th, 2024. Presented in the following pages are the 2024-2025 proposed budget. This budget was developed to ensure that all students will graduate with knowledge and skills needed to be successful, contributing citizens of the 21st century. Newburgh Dundee Public Schools is committed to this vision for all students at every grade level. This budget is representative of the continuing struggles that schools and students across the country are continuing to face. Post-pandemic enrollment declines and looming fiscal funding cliffs have all played a role in budget development. Newburgh Dundee Public Schools has seen a decline in enrollment over the past 10 years, which correlates to a decline in student enrollment across the state and nation. Newburgh Dundee Public Schools is currently working on programs to encourage enrollment, including working with homeschool families, expanding online learning options, improving career technical education opportunities, and promoting student mental and physical well-being. This budget is based on the governor's biennial state school fund budget of $10.2 billion. This accounts for approximately 47% of the proposed general fund for Newburgh Dundee Public Schools. Tax collections are 33.5% of general fund revenue, and the remainder of the revenues in the general fund comes from fees, contracts, and carryover funds. In contrast, 78.5% of expenditures in the general fund are payroll and benefits and support 482.94 FTE. There are many important things to remember as we go through the 2024-25 school year. The Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund 3, or ESSER 3, will expire on September 30th of 2024. Loss of COVID-19 based grants placed a huge burden on school districts to negotiate between services that were provided under these grants and what a district can continue to fund without these grants. Notable projects for the 24-25 school year include purchasing the new district-wide science and health curricula, completion of the construction of the new Dundee Elementary School, work on right-sizing classrooms due to lower enrollments, and a continued focus on student mental and physical well-being. The proposed budget for Newburgh Dundee Public Schools focuses on maintaining staffing levels that continue to support students, continued focus on educational standards, supporting student mental health, and concluding work on scheduled bond projects. Through conservative fiscal spending, exploring new grant opportunities, and community partnerships, Newburgh Dundee Public Schools is excited to roll out the new school year and continue to support the students of Newburgh and Dundee. Respectfully, Stephen Phillips. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move over to budget overview.
So I've prepared just a short PowerPoint. Sorry. Just to kind of go over some of the things that stand out for this. So first, just the making sure. Oh, it's not working. Okay. So just restating the vision and mission statement for Newburgh Dundee school districts, which were also stated in the budget message from Dr. Phillips. So the vision, Newburgh Dundee school district students will graduate with the knowledge and skills needed to be successful contributing citizens of the 21st century. The mission, in partnership with parents and our community, the Newburgh Dundee School District will educate all students to achieve their full potential as knowledgeable, self-assured citizens ready for college and/or careers. So our priorities are to provide high quality, well-rounded, and healthy educational experiences to all students, build strong relationships with all of our shareholders, including families, community, and students, promote trust, support, and a collective responsibility for student success, ensure that every classroom has high quality, effective educators supported by strong leadership and staff, align resources to accomplish goals within a balanced budget, plan systemically and strategically so that Newburgh Dundee Public Schools continues to succeed and thrive in the future. So the purpose of the Budget Committee, just a quick kind of overview, is to create the spending authority for public funds per Oregon budget law, present a balanced financial plan that estimates revenues and expenditures, certify property tax for the county assessor, receive public comment over proposed district spending, and discuss the proposed budget document and make a well-educated recommendation to the school board for adoption. Your role is to hear the budget message, receive the proposed budget and review the proposal, take public comment, engage in constructive conversations about the proposed budget, ensure that the budget aligns to district priorities, and approve the budget and tax rate for adoption. So right now we have presented a balanced budget. Expenditures are broken out by cost centers. Sorry. And I've also given you an outline of changes in the budget. And one of our key focuses this year for the budget is to right-size the classrooms. For those of you that don't know, right-sizing the classroom is kind of a new phase that's come out with some of the new fiscal cliffs and dropping in enrollment. And so we have some graphs that will kind of show you how that information came about. And basically what it boils down to is having the right number of staff for the number of students that you have, not being overstaffed and not being understaffed. So just some historical information for you. This is your teacher experience in 2018 through 2025. You can see that Newburgh School District is still above the state average. And then this is kind of showing you what our per student state school fund allocation is by ADM. So we did our ADM-R and our ADM-W down below. So the top line is representative of dollars and the bottom two lines are represented of number of students.
Do we have a copy of that in this packet? I'm not seeing it.
Uh,
If we don't, can you just
yes.
tell?
This one is, the
Oh.
first slide, the first graph was not.
Okay.
Right. So I
Okay.
didn't include all of them in there, so, but it is in the little packet that you were given.
Okay, great. I found.
Yep.
Thank you.
So then the other thing I wanted to provide was kind of screenshot of what our enrollment looks like. So I took the month of April from 2020 to 2024 and showed you at the end of April what was our student enrollment, the actual head count for students. So I just wanted you to be able to see this. You can see in 23-24 in April, we're at 4,059. Sure. Do you have particular ones you like to see? So it starts at 4894 in 2020, or in 2001. The last, yeah, 5172 and 1617. Before that, 2010, 2011, which was 5220. Probably your 1617 at 5172. So that's, oh, it doesn't show up on there.
I'm sorry.
Was the year, but I mean, that would 2019, 2020, so what's 2018?
4,909. You're welcome.
Just so that we can be on the same page, do you mind reading the numbers starting with 16, 17, just so that
Mhm.
I can't read any of it,
Nope,
sorry.
you're fine. So starting with 1617, we're at 5172. 1718, we're at 5,045. 1819, we're at 4,909. 1920, we're at 4,847. 2020, 2021, we're at 4,443. 2021 to 2022, we're at 4238. 22-23, we're at 4181. And 23-24, we're at 4059.
Thank you.
Can I ask about the very first graph slide about teacher experience? Can you explain what that means?
So this is when you look at all the experience that your teachers have in district. The state recognizes that it is more expensive, the more time your teachers have in the classroom. And so their experience, how many years they've been teaching, you get an adjustment on your state school funding for that. So.
Thank you.
Yep.
What's our anticipated enrollment for 2024-25?
So our estimate this year was 3820. And I actually, that was what we initially reported to the state as being our estimate for membership. I think we're going to come in closer to 4,000. If not just slightly over. Yeah. Yeah. So you'll see that in like when I have our state school fund estimate in revenue, it's actually higher than what the estimate from ODE is, because I anticipate when we change that number, we will get additional revenue for students that we weren't planning on based on the estimate of membership and revenue.
What enrollment has the budget been built on for 24-25?
We built it on the 4,000.
Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so these are just some of your budget assumptions. Again, state school funding at 10.2 billion. We are on the 51 side of the 49-51 split. The enrollment estimate, like I said, that we submitted last fall was 3820, and we will be adjusting that. So this budget was actually built on the 4,000. High cost disability increased from 57 students to 75. And we anticipate that that number will continue to go up. The county tax increase, based on 6%, will be about 6%. We estimate beginning fund balance at 8.7 million. The COVID grants are will all be sunsetted as of September 30th, 2024. And I just felt it was necessary to point out that there's been a significant increase in the current year for electrical spending. So you'll see higher numbers in our electricity projections for next year as well.
I have a question in regards to the high cost students.
Mhm.
We can get reimbursed
Yes.
for that also.
Yep.
And I'm curious, out of the 75, about what percentage are we reimbursed for? Because
The 75 students actually contribute to the total amount that we're reimbursed. So we're allowed 35,000 per student. Anything over that, we get to claim on high cost disability. And then however much money the state has available for all the claims submitted, it's distributed out to the districts. So it depends on how many people submit for high cost disability, how much we'll get. This year on 57, we received an additional $1 million. Okay. Okay, so payroll assumptions, we're still bargaining with the licensed union, but I've included a 4% cost of living. The classified is settled last year at 3.5%. And we budgeted on a $25 insurance cap increase for all staff. There is going to be a slight increase to our workers' comp mod rate, just because we've had several really large claims over the last couple of years. And we will be decreasing staffing to right size the classrooms in the district. So other considerations, we do have a science and health curriculum adoption. We hopefully will be completing all of our bond projects in 24-25. Insurance liability increased about 8.5%. We have moved, so when you look at the budget and we talk about right sizing, you'll notice that especially in special education, we have several additional FTE. One of the things that is important to note is that in previous years, we've filled those with contractors, and those contractors don't have associated FTE with them. Now we've moved them into a position in the budget where they would actually have FTE associated to them, instead of contracting services with them. So you will see what appears to be an increase, but it's an increase in employee FTE, but a decrease in what we're spending out in contract services.
can I clarify?
Mhm.
So you're saying any that were contractors are no longer contractors, but district employees?
That is our hope this year, yes, because the union has requested that we try to maintain those as union positions.
And then you were saying decreasing staffing to right size classes.
Mhm.
How oversized are we?
So we specifically looked at our elementaries. This current school year, our 6 elementary average class size was 18.7 students per teacher. We had some classes as low as 12 or 13. The kids just, especially like kindergarten, the kids just didn't come in like we thought they would. And rather than, in September, lay somebody off and have a class of 25, we went with it. We can't keep doing that. And so we've been able to downsize elementary by about 10 teachers. And our average, instead of 18.7, will go up to 20.5. And so we still feel really good about 20.5 on average. We currently have blends this year, but we will have more blends next year. What a blend is for instance, let's say you have a first grade with 30 kids. A first grade with one teacher with 30 kids is tough. But also a first grade with 30 kids with 2 teachers is tough fiscally. And so if you have a second grade with 30 kids as well, what you do is you blend them and it's 60 and you have 3 teachers shared between those 2 grades. And so you have 20s instead of a 30 and a 30 or a 15, 15, 15, 15. So we've put some blends together to try and make the numbers feel better than super high or super low. So I think the good news is we were able to right size, and it really, in my opinion, it didn't hurt us all that much. We still have our average is still under 21 kids per class, which I think a lot of districts would love to say that.
Can you clarify something? I'm wondering if questions will come about from it. When you said 60 and then you said 20, 20, 20, are you saying you're gonna have a 20 for first grade, 20 for second grade, and then a 20 of a 1-2? Or are you doing 1-2 across the board?
Right. That's a great question. I asked that same question to the principals, and they said the best model for them is that all 3 teachers will blend. So there won't be a true first, a true second, and a mix. It'll be mix, mix, mix.
Okay. So just some graphs to kind of show you, this is your local revenue or your general fund revenue by major object. So your local revenues are in green, intermediate revenues are in yellow, purple is your state revenue, federal is that little tiny 0, and then blue is other revenue. And then we have expenditures by major function in the general fund. You can see that 58% is instruction, 36% is support services. Other expenditures fall in that 0 category again, because it's so small, it didn't register a percent. Contingencies are 2% and roughly 4% for unappropriated ending fund balance. And then when we look at major object, we look at wages, about 49%, benefits are 30%, services, support services are 11%, supplies are 3%, capital in the general fund is 0, other objects 1%, transfers and contingencies 2%, and then your reserves about 4%.
I'm sorry.
You're
You're like, you know me well enough. Ending fund balance,
Uh-huh.
4%, correct?
I think that was on the previous slide.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can you remind me, as a board policy, was there a percentage that we
Yes.
wanted to maintain, and where are we from that?
We are just a hair over for contingency and for ending fund balance in the general fund. I want to say it's like 3.8% for ending fund balance and just under 2% or right at 2% for contingency. Yep. Okay. Yep. Yep. So in your packet behind the superintendent's message, I also included some graphs just because I thought some of this information might be helpful for you. The first one is the district allocation of state school funding versus the state allocation. So what the state sets per year versus what the district actually gets. The state is in blue, the orange line is what the district gets. So even though the state allocation has gone up, the amount per student has gone down for Newburgh. And that has to do with our decline in enrollment. The next page is that same graph that was on the PowerPoint that you guys asked about. That shows your per student state school fund allocation by your ADM. The next graph is staffing versus enrollment trends. And this came from the Egenomics lab, where they looked at several different schools we attended a training on this and they provided this information for our district specifically. In 22-23, we had 487, it says employees, but remember this is FTE, not actual employees, and 4,200. So again, we're still slightly overstaffed for the number of students, especially compared to where we were in 15-16.
Excuse me, Heather, can I just ask a question?
Uh-huh.
In the actual budget document with the summary that you sent out, it said on page 9 of it, says total allotment for all employments, that the 24 FT was 554.48. And I just wondered why there's like a big difference.
Which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the summary one that you sent out on page 9, actual page 9. You said, it said the FTA, and then it said the total FT for next year would be 567, so it didn't match the charts. And so I was just wondering.
Right, so I don't know exactly which numbers they looked at for their employees. I don't know. I do know that we have a couple of errors in FTE in our current proposed budget where students were given FTE, and I need to go back and change those. So when I was going through the document that outlines the changes in the budget, I came across a few of those. So I don't know, 22-23, I don't have the actual FTE for that. I don't know if you have, do you have that? Because you usually have those previous.
I was just reading
don't
on
have it.
page 9 of the document that you sent out,
Mhm.
it said 550.48, and I thought, well, that doesn't come anywhere close to that.
550.48.
Yeah, that's
But
what,
that's for 23-24.
yeah, and but it says for proposed for 24-25, it was 5,667. And so that's higher. Anyway, I was just curious.
Yeah, so it is going to be a little bit higher because we added those specialty positions.
Not
um,
that much higher. No,
With contractors.
yeah.
But yes, we do also have still some errors with students having FTE attached to them.
It was just a curiosity.
Okay. The next graph shows you what Oregon's enrollment versus school employees looks like. So kind of the same thing that you just saw for Newburgh, but this is for the entire state of Oregon. And so this is a statewide problem where we're technically overstaffed for the number of students that we have. Enrollment statewide is going down, but we seem to have an increase in the number of staff that are hired in districts. I do imagine that we will see a sharp decrease in the number of staffing over the next couple of years. One, because of the ESSER funding that is going away. And I believe that a lot of districts used ESSER funds to support additional positions in their budget, and they'll be cutting those now that that funding is going away.
I would say there's also the SIA fund, the state grant that came into play during this time. So that was
Yeah. So we
most
had a-
significantly spent on staff. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
When you've got Salem, Kaiser and Portland and other big districts laying off hundreds, that'll show up.
Yeah, so I mean, the graph was kind of interesting, which is why I wanted to share it with you, because it kind of shows you where Oregon's at. But I think that we're going to see that financial cliff, the same with enrollment and employment in the years going forward.
And you mentioned that under Edunomics or whatever, that you're not quite sure how they came up with the number, and this is just, is that accurate statement at this point? I mean, because
I'm sure that they used numbers from ODE.
Mhm.
So when they're looking at, like, when they reported the staff for Newburgh at 487? Yeah, I don't know if they only looked at certified and classified directly in the classrooms, or if it included all administrators, or if it included part-time employees. I don't know what that number was that it included, but just know that any of those things being added to it, if it wasn't included, would just increase the number of employees we have per student. So the 487, I feel like, is really low for a staff count for us.
And it wasn't just general fund versus all funds.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, okay.
It was all funds. Yeah. So the next page is another graph that was presented to us specifically with Newburgh data from Edunomics. And this is from the year 21-22, so that is a few years old. But this shows you what it costs per student to operate each one of our schools during the 21-22 school year.
So Heather, what goes into this number?
This is the total expenses of your school divided by your enrollment.
And that's ADMW? Or
No,
ADMR.
ADMW is weighted, so they're doing a head count of students on this. So
I guess one more question on that. Why such the disparity between like you and Young and Dundee Elementary?
So I can tell you that in 21-22, Dundee Elementary was a life skills, had life skills classes for special education, and they were the only elementary in the Newburgh School District at that time that had them. So that would increase your cost at Dundee Elementary because you have kids with higher needs trying to learn life skills. So it's obviously, it's going to cost more money to educate those students. You have to have more specialties and more FTE and
I have a question
Uh-huh.
specifically about Dundee, since I've got it open to the page. Looking at previous budgets, for 21-22, per pupil expenses for Dundee is closer to like 10,000-11,000. How is there such a big swing on like numbers on the previous budget versus what's on here? So what is
what's
it that
on
they're
this?
looking at?
Yeah, so these aren't documents that I created. These came from Edunomics. So I'm not sure if they took into account a % of administrative costs in these totals. I know when I first started here that we didn't do a really great job of tracking what the actual expenses per building were. Some of those things we really had lump summed into one general account that we were paying from. So we've been working on trying to clean that up so that we can get a better accurate picture of what it costs to operate each one of the schools. So I don't know in 21-22, other than I do know that there was ESSER funding that came into play, and this probably includes grant funds.
Okay.
And do we track, do you produce anything like this one? I mean, this is pretty old, but are we planning on producing something like this going forward?
My hope is that we will get our expenditures allocated to the correct cost centers, and we'll be able to provide this documentation annually at the budget meetings where it's more up to date and more realistic for what we're actually spending.
Thanks.
Mhm. So the last little graph that we showed you is basically taking those costs per student per school and comparing it with their assessment and how well they score on assessments. So if you are in the top right-hand corner, that is a high cost to educate, but high output on assessment. If you're in the top left, it is low cost to educate, but high output on assessment. The bottom left is low cost to educate, but low cost or low output on assessment. And then on the right-hand side at the bottom is your high cost to educate, but still low scores on assessment. So I just thought this was probably some good information to just kind of share with you that, you know, these are kind of the things that we're looking at and what we can do to improve education for students.
I have two questions.
Okay.
So we're comparing the spending per student in 21-22, but we're comparing it to proficiency in 22-23.
Mhm.
Can we compare it in the same year?
We probably could. This is the graph that they sent me. And so we could get that information and pull that together for the same year.
Okay. And then which schools were title schools at that point and what were the socioeconomic percentage of those schools?
JA and Edwards are only two title schools and we're also our only two title schools at that time. And what was the other part?
Socioeconomic.
I don't have that number, but I can sure get that for you. Uh-huh. Okay, so the next several pages are kind of what I pulled out of the budget document as being changes for you. Just kind of trying to identify some things that were different from the previous year and maybe give a little bit of explanation to it. So I don't know how you want to proceed. If you guys have your own questions you'd like to ask. If you want to just start going through the budget document.
I do have a question in regards to the increase in electrical services. Is there anything that's driving that? Is it just purely rate increases? Is there something going on at those schools causing those increases? And is there any plans to kind of, look at alternatives like adding solar or things like that to try and reduce that burden on electrical?
So I do know that for next year, it's an anticipated 12.8% increase on the electric bill itself. And so we've kind of taken that into account when estimating the cost of electricity for next year. I do think that some of the increased cost we had this year is because of construction that was ongoing in our buildings, which can increase the amount of electrical consumption, but not knowing how much of it might have been related to construction. I erred on the side of caution and went ahead and budgeted, assuming that we wouldn't have much change in the electrical usage at each one of the schools. Our primary big ticket schools were the high school and Edwards, where they both increased just slightly over 100%, I think. They also have the most new square footage from construction. And so that will also increase the amount of electricity that we use. I do hope that we don't have to use everything that we have budgeted for next year in electricity, but not knowing exactly how the usage or where the usage came from this year, it made it hard to not want to at least try and budget for that for next year. And we did have solar panels at the high school on the roof, which created a whole nother issue because they leaked and have continued to leak. And we've had a massive amount of repairs to the roof. So we're actually having the solar panels removed at the high school. We will not be looking at replacing solar panels on the roof. In the future, if we look at doing solar panels, we will look at putting them on a ground base so that they don't affect the integrity of our buildings.
Regarding the cost of power, electricity, as a school district, I know residential PGs announced that we had an increase this year. We're also having another increase next year, which will be total about 20+% over the 2 years. As a school district, do we have a different rating? Did you guys get notified of that? Like, are you subject to the same rate increase as residential?
Yes.
Okay.
However, I will say that I believe there's a surcharge on electrical billing when you use over so many kilowatts per hour. So where most residential bill or most houses wouldn't hit that, the school district will hit that every month just because the size of our buildings. So.
Thank you.
So the question I have is about metering.
Mhm.
And you had mentioned that it's hard to tell where the increases are coming from. Is it rolled up to a master so we don't get the individual building metering?
No, we get the individual building metering, but I don't know which portion of that usage is construction versus what
Gotcha.
is regular usage.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, that's-
I have a non-electrical question. And it's more of a general education piece regarding the COVID grants, because this is something we're hearing across the state. The grants are going away, and so now we have to cut people. Was there criteria associated with them that's like, don't be paying for things that's gonna go away when the grants go away? I'd love a little education on that whole mystery.
Right. And I wasn't here when Newburgh first got their ESSER funds, but I can tell you that when I got here, I was pleasantly surprised that they did not staff or fund staffing with ESSER funds. So we don't have any staff reductions that are a result of ESSER money directly. All of ours are a trickle down. So one of the things that ideally, when you get a grant fund and you know that it's a limited time and it's a one-time thing, you wouldn't put something in there that you know you have to do every single year or that you're going to have to do every 2 years. While it was nice during COVID to be able to use that to kind of bring curriculum up to date and, do some maintenance on buildings and other things that they use that for. The problem is now that all that money that was spent that we knew was going to have to continue to be spent has to go back into the budget. So when we talk about curriculum, our math adoption, which was done this year, was what we used the remainder of our COVID funds for. And next year we had to budget for science and health. But we had to add those to the general fund, which is not something that there was really a plan when ESSER funds were first received. The money was cut out of the general fund, which means it made it available to be spent somewhere else. And so now we have to add back in those things that were cut from the general fund in the beginning. And that's kind of where the trickle down comes into. Now we're affecting FTE and other items.
A lot of the districts that are really struggling right now, they're facing a double hit. They spent ESSER funds on people and then their enrollment's dropping. So they're taking it twice. And we've been fortunate enough to stay away from spending ESSER funds on people, but our enrollment has been dipping. So yeah, we're reduced, but we don't have it as bad as a lot of them that used ESSER that way.
I don't know if we need to get the nitty gritty already, but the ESSER funds, where is that in the proposed budget that actually shows that drop? And how much is that money total? Either that or the accumulation of that and other COVID grants, like how much are we losing? And where does that show in the proposed revenue?
So the majority of that was in Fund 201 as federal money. And you may not see it as a significant drop because it's not a one-time in the year 23-24, we suddenly lost $5 million of ESSER 3 because we had several years to be spending that money. So we only budgeted each year for what we had available to be spent that was left from the grant. So you may not see a sharp decline in Fund 201.
Well, I do. It's 4,500. Is that where it lands? Because last year, 2023 actuals, we were 3.7 million. Last year adopted 2.8 million or 2.75. And then this year we're less than 500K. So is that where that money's, we're losing that from? 4,500?
Which page is
Rester,
that?
Rev, Fed, Gov to Stat is, I don't know, all those
Yes.
short words are,
Yes.
so.
Yeah.
Page 19 in the proposed. Okay. So we're losing over, well, roughly $2.3 million from these,
From last year, yeah.
from last year. Okay.
But in some ways, we're not losing it. We're not getting the same funding from that source anymore.
Correct. It was just the grant is running out, so we no longer are able to budget for the extra, $2 million that we might have been able to if the grant was continuing.
But Heather mentioned it, but I want to kind of maybe drill this home a little bit. Last year when we had our math adoption, or this current year, ballpark $1 million, ESSER paid for it. This budget, science and health, we've budgeted $1 million, no ESSER. So it's general fund. So, yeah, that's how, for us, that's how ESSER going away is hurting us. Other people are losing people. And I guess to be fair, if you lose $1 million of general fund to pay for curriculum that you could have been buying people with, I guess to be fair, we're up against that crunch too.
But again, though, like outside of the ESSER funds that came in, generally we would budget for that curriculum adoption at the cost. So,
Yeah, pre-COVID, you're right, it would have been general fund.
so it was nice that we didn't have to pay for it, but it's not. Were you saying originally that the problem was that we didn't leave that line item in the budget, so we don't have it saved up in the same way?
Yes, that
Yes.
is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question on the FTE numbers on page 12. So with 23-24, with the grand total of 550.49, does that include the contracted? Does not. So then 24-25 would include all of those contracted positions that we want to try and pull in district. And
Yes.
okay.
And we don't anticipate bringing every single contracted position. Like currently we have 16 positions in EAs that are contracted. And so they've not had a budgeted FTE prior to this coming year. And they're not a full FTE, but portions of FTE. And then we're also looking at a psych, occupational therapy, a counselor, and 2 SLPs that we were getting through WESD and the local service plan, that will now be our employees instead of purchasing through the local service plan.
So for like the SLP, that person would actually be physically here versus over a Zoom.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
On those FTE numbers there, I guess I'm interested in how we can add approximately 17 FTE and drop down 70,000 or $70 million.
$70 million though, I want to say is your bond spending.
Yeah, look at
So-
4,000,
So-
follow that across.
Yeah, the 4,000 is your capital purchases. That's your bond purchases. And because that bond money is being spent down, that is where you're seeing your biggest difference in what was budgeted last year versus what is budgeted for the current year, because we've already spent that $70 million on bond stuff. And so we wouldn't have that for the next year. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
Out of the anticipated adjustments in staffing, how many of them are we assuming will be through attrition versus a rift?
So right now, I believe that we are up to 9 positions that we can account for with attrition. Whether it's all in the elementary or being able to move people who are endorsed or licensed to teach at different levels. So I really don't anticipate right now having a large number of RIFs. I think we have some in administration that we've made or that we're proposing to make. And those obviously we wouldn't fill. So they're completely being ripped.
Can I clarify, when you say administration, you mean administrators, not confidential?
So I guess I'm thinking confidential supervisory administrators and directors.
Could you clarify RIF for me?
A reduction in force.
Thank you.
Yes. And with the reduction in force, that provides certain benefits to the employee. Should we need to hire them back at the beginning of next year, it enables them to be recalled. So it kind of similar to a layoff, but it's an actual spelled out step-by-step procedure in the union contract.
Can you clarify for me? I'm looking at support services expenditures. And it says adding a director of operations. Who currently is filling that role?
Currently, we have that position filled by Tracy Luzada, and she was as a supervisor, though not as an administrator, because she didn't have an admin license. And so Larry Hampton was that position prior to, and then Larry retired last year, and we kind of put him just in charge of making sure that the bond projects were completed. So he's currently employed through the end of September on a rehire contract post-retirement. So that position will be going away the end of September. Tracy is actually going to go back to her administrative assistant position that she had in maintenance. And then we have hired a maintenance director to oversee that department.
Is that what the shift is in FTE from that 2 to 1 and that overall 5.5 to 4.25 on page 63? Under the confidential, well, it's an overall on page 63. And it is, I'm looking, sorry. Man, I lost it. There was a 2 to a 1 in FTE.
Are you looking at line where it says 5.5 in 2023 and then 4.25 in 24-25? It's under 2544.
63.
No,
Total
I'll
function
find it and come back to it.
5.48.
Sorry.
Oh, I think I see what you're saying. Are you under the function code 2544 under maintenance? We're under the
Yes,
confidential.
thank you.
Yeah.
I
And
had
we-
the overall box and then just a little asterisk next to the,
Okay, so yes, that is part of it. The other piece of it is another position that we are looking at reducing. That's a confidential position.
Can you explain what confidential position is?
Confidential means that they're not covered by a union contract.
Thank you.
Just for a little clarity, we have 4 groups: classified and they're union, certified, they're union, administrative, no, and then confidential.
I have one more question on that. So as there, it says Director of Operations, moving a portion of the expense to bond. How will this look long-term when the bond is done? How will we sustain that?
We will need to move that position back into the general fund.
So
We
what?
We do, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We do have about 3.5 years worth of funding anticipated to be left in the bond. And because of the number of smaller projects that we will be completing with the extra bond money, we feel like that's kind of a reasonable, it gives us some time to gradually add that position fully back to the general fund over the next 3 years.
So not the next biennium, the biennium after.
So for this year, this next year, and then we'll have 2 years after that. So it will be in the next biennium. We'll need to move this position back. So we're at the end of our biennium now.
Yeah.
So the start of our next biennium, we'll need to begin moving that position back in.
What's what percentage of it is bond and what is general fund?
We did a 50-50 split.
Thank you.
And that's been the case for the whole time?
The-
Of paying this role, or is that going forward?
That's going forward. Currently, we have Larry Hampton in that position and he's being 100% funded out of bond at a 0.7 FTE because we have so many more construction projects going on. And that's his oversight of the bond.
Is that normal practice, either for you or Dr. Phillips to, 'cause I thought bond money, you're not supposed to pay people for stuff.
Yeah, it's very common. Yeah,
Okay.
and for instance, a new building's built and it's got a lot more square footage, and you bring on a custodian, bond. You can pay them out
For
of the,
short term or long term?
as long as the bond's got money, and the bond can go for, no, Claire? Okay, please tell me.
Bond funds aren't meant for operational expenses. They're meant for construction and capitalized items. So a custodian that was helping with the construction and providing advice and helping to select products for the new building, that would be an appropriate expense for the bond fund. But the ongoing bond fund, once the construction is completed, then the bond funds should no longer be spent on the building. You can certainly furnish and put all the equipment in to get it up to speed, but ongoing, 3 or 4 years with a custodial is not, it's operational. It's not a bond funded.
Okay, it's good to know. We've planned differently, so I'm
Okay.
glad I learned that.
Are you done? Yeah. Okay. So I have a few questions and there's certainly not ones that I would expect you to answer tonight because they're big questions. And so I did submit a list. So the budget committee has a copy of the questions that I submitted. And Heather has already been working on responses, and there's some that are, just takes more. I just submitted these to her midday today, so it takes longer than a few hours to provide responses. But there's a few I want to highlight in the room just so that people know that they were asked. The first one is, I would say on page 18, the beginning fund balance for the general fund. We have 8.5 million that was budgeted at the start for 23-24. And when we started the year July 1, 2023, it was 7.7 million. So we carried over 775,000 less than had been budgeted in the prior year. So that kind of gets us started off in the year kind of behind the we have to kind of make up for that throughout the year. Then as we look at the beginning fund balance for 24-25 at 8.7 million. So it's expected to grow by 200,000. And when I look at the latest financial reports that I had available to me that were posted to the board in April, I see a much different picture in terms of having that as large of a fund balance. And I know I don't have all the information. There is obviously going to be additional revenue in May and June that is not accounted for in that April report. And there will always be things that are encumbered that we expect that we set aside because we may need to pay. There'll be some that will go unspent and then carry into the fund balance. So just my initial look at it is that we're probably going to be we're not going to reach that 8.7 million, and just wondering how we're going to make up those funds that are needed to balance the budget. Again, staff would need more time to provide additional information for to find an answer for that. Another question I asked was comparing the Oregon Department of Education state school fund estimate to the Newburgh proposed budget. There was a difference between what the district's budget is higher than the state estimate. And one of the reasons why is because I've already gotten a response is that the enrollment is coming in higher. And the high cost disability students are increasing when I just use the same number of students from this year. One thing I would caution us is that high cost disability is a percentage of across the state, and it always starts at about 80% reimbursement rate, and it gets down to, I think it's down to like 49% percent right now. So you don't get all the money back. And certainly it's something we should be lobbying for at the next legislative session to ask them to restore that back up to that 80% level. It gets over time, it erodes down in what its value is, and it's time for us to make some noise about that. Another item was on the Fund 203 PERS Reserve Fund. I want to say on my electronic copy, it was page 18, but that's not the case here. It's okay, page 21. So I was wondering what happened to the $700,000 that was budgeted in as a beginning fund balance for the PERS Reserve Fund. That money was set aside when I worked here many years ago, when we issued PERS bonds, and it was intended to help with the offset in PERS benefit costs and in future years. And so what I'm hearing is now that it's going to be transferred into general fund, it's budgeted in the 23-24 year to actually transfer. I hadn't seen it happen yet. And I'm just wondering if we seen an increase in PERS costs of 700,000 to use up that reserve, or is it being used to offset a shortfall in general fund?
I think it's probably a combination of the money sitting there and not being used, and we do have a reserve for that in our debt service fund as well. So moving the money where it would be more useful this year, and moving it to the general fund to be able to close out that 203 fund.
Okay. So the 301 is a separate fund with a separate reserve. Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, can I interrupt? Ooh, why are we moving these to general funds, and why are we not allocating it for PERS like it was originally meant to?
Right now, we don't have a PERS, a need for it in PERS. What we're paying our PERS bond with, and what we have budgeted for PERS, that there's not a need for that additional reserve fund. So it's basically just moving it. We were trying to close out the fund because it was pretty stagnant.
I have a question about I think in OSBA, they were talking about PERS is going to increase across the whole state in next year, not this budget year, but a year from now, by quite a bit, and that it really hit school districts by a lot. And so I was wondering if that might be something that it still might be needed for because of the change in PERS, what they're requiring public bodies like school districts to put into PERS. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wondered.
Yeah.
So what would it look like if we don't change it to general fund? What would that impact?
So that would be $700,000 off the top of the beginning fund balance that we would need to remove and we would need to cut from the budget.
So one of the concerns is using it all in 1 year and then the next year the reserve is gone and you'll have to reduce that amount anyway. So really thinking about how do you make that happen over time rather than making it as a quick fix for 1 year and then having, you're just delaying it by a year and you'll no longer have your reserve. So
What is the larger financial impact when that PERS hits the district in the next few years versus moving the 700,000 now?
So the 700,000 was actually in the current year's budget. It's not proposed in next year's budget. So the impact would simply be the ending fund balance is going to be short at least that $700,000. Either way, I think if there's any major changes to PERS, it's going to have a significant impact, and I don't think $700,000 is going to be enough to help in the long term for that PERS shortfall either.
Just an article that was in the OSBA news, they had Gladstone School District as an example. And they figured, and their school district's a little bit smaller than Newburgh, they figured that it was going to be at least $1 million hit when that was in this news article that was published on the Oregon OED news that OSBA was in. It was published, I don't know, last fall, October or so.
Yeah, and there is nothing that says just because the transfer was budgeted for the current year that we have to make that transfer. Since that was previously approved by the board when they adopted the budget, it would be fine for the board to not make that transfer as well.
But what would be the impact for this school year if we chose to put it back and hold it again? Do we know?
That would be a $700,000. So
Or just the ending balance?
so you'd
Okay.
be looking, and if you want to place a value on 700,000, you're looking at approximately 7 employees.
So one quick question, I guess it's not really quick, but it's
Sorry,
never
was
quick.
Claire done?
Oh,
no, I'm not done, but if you have something related, please go ahead.
we've talked a lot about, where we're at this year, and ending fund balance and such, do we have a good feel on where you're aiming to end the year at? Are we doing well with the current budget that we have? For what was adopted, for the current year, are we on track or not?
So what was adopted for the current year is about 700,000 shy of where we actually ended up. So we budgeted for this current year at 8.5. We came in at 7.7. We have been very fiscally responsible, I feel. We're currently in a budget freeze at the district. So other than payroll and essentials for education or emergencies, we're not spending any additional funding, even if it is budgeted for. So my hope is that we're going to be very close to that 8.7, which will make our budget balance. If we need to remove the 700,000 from the beginning fund balance, then we will also need to figure out where we're going to make those reductions in the budget as well.
There were a couple areas that I asked about. One was telephone expense and that where we had reduced our budget significantly. And Heather, you had good news on that.
Yeah, so one of the things with COVID was we did a lot of hotspots and cell phones to be able to contact staff. And when we did an audit of which lines were currently being used, we were able to reduce that. And with the work of our technology department, they were able to get us on a better contract for those services, which saves us a considerable amount of money each month. Significant enough that we were able to budget, I believe it's $12,000 for telephone for next year. Keep in mind
I'm
that
skipping
that
some.
12,000 does not include our phones in our offices
I have a
because
few.
that money
I'm
or
still
those
stuck
phones
with
are
20.
a VoIP, so the voice over internet. So we don't pay a carrier for those services.
My apology for the side conversation. I was asking about a number of questions. We'd spent an hour and 15 minutes. Do we want to continue or take a break? We have a break scheduled in here, so I just want to know what people would like. All right, we'll continue since there are no objections.
Okay, and my next question is, I had a couple of questions about nutrition services. I wanted to understand the FTE change, especially in supervisory and administrative oversight. It's doubled in terms of the number of FTE. And also in nutrition services, concerned about the reductions in food budget. Food costs have continued to rise, and there's we're expanding to a community eligibility program that allows for all students to be provided meals. So as we anticipate more meals being served, and food costs going, I mean, I think we all go to the grocery store. We've watched it the last, 3 or 4 years. So I have concern of administrative costs going up while food costs are going down, and what quality of a program we're going to have for students.
So I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but last year we had a surprise visit to our summer food program where there was community concern over whether or not it was being managed appropriately. We had a whole audit procedure over our summer food program, which spurred ODE Nutrition to come in and do an actual full-blown audit over our nutrition program early this last fall. So some of the findings that they had in that audit was that there was lack of financial oversight in the nutrition program and lack of administrative oversight in that program. So we, at the recommendations of ODE for how that should be staffed, we needed to have a licensed administrator overseeing that program. And then we also needed to have some financial oversight as well. So when you look at the FTE increase in food service for the administrative costs, that is where you're seeing your increase. A portion of my wages and a portion of Mr. Lindenberger's wages are being charged to nutrition for the oversight of that program to make sure that we're meeting all of the ODE's requirements for our nutrition program. To answer the other question about the cost of food, when we hired our current supervisor for the nutrition program, which is Tina, and she came to us from a kitchen, and she has done an incredible job of utilizing commodities and getting bang for our buck for products that she's purchasing. We have seen a drastic reduction in the cost of food. And the only thing I can contribute it to is we're using less pre-packaged or pre-prepared food. and just using more of our commodity sources that are available to us. And we're utilizing those in a way that is turning out to be a cost savings for the district. Where I have us proposed in the budget for spending on food next year, I don't think we're even going to get that high this year in our food costs. So I'm pretty confident that we should be able to keep that. When I estimated those costs, I looked at the last 4 months that we were in CEP, and then calculated out what I thought it would be for a full year on CEP under Tina's supervision. So that's how I came up with those numbers.
Did we had a loss then from ODE's, a fine or anything from you?
We did in our summer food service program last year. But as far as our regular food service program, there was no financial penalty for the corrections they wanted us to make
So we had to make up that out of the general fund, the loss.
for the summer food program last year.
And how much was that?
It was about 35,000.
No, no.
How is something like that reflected in the budget when those kind of fees come down?
Those are just expenditures that are charged out just depending on what the charge was for and where we had money available to pay for them. So some of those were actually absorbed in the food costs in nutrition. They are just non-reimbursable expenses in nutrition.
So when I see an administrator at 0.7 FTE in nutrition services, is 7/10 of the administrator's time being spent on nutrition services?
I think that probably
70%.
so we're looking, that accounts for 2, so that accounts
Okay.
for fiscal oversight. And I would say between myself and a member of my department, we spend a great deal of time in the financial side of nutrition. And the rest of it is in the administrator overseeing the entire department, which would be Mr. Lindenberger. So he might be able to answer a little bit better how much time he spends actually overseeing.
If you're looking at a percentage for me, I would say from my chair, it's about 10% is the time that I put in working with the 2 direct supervisors. And then if there are issues that are out into the buildings itself, but primarily with the shift with the 2 supervisors, they do handle the lion's share.
I would say it's unusual to have an assistant superintendent, I think is your title, being charged directly to nutrition services. I do understand the need for administrative oversight, but I think it's unusual to have, I guess that would be is it a 0.5?
0.4.
0.4?
Mhm.
Of an assistant superintendent charged in nutrition services. It's something that I've never experienced before with 30 years of experience in school finance. So I do find it unusual, and I'm still very concerned that our children have fresh fruits and vegetables on a daily basis in their meals, and paying for the assistant superintendent from the food program is a question mark from me. So.
Can I ask the members of the budget committee, if you're looking in your book for other members, could you tell us like what page you're on and like what number you're
I'm on
on?
page 108.
Great. But
Sorry
just going
about that.
forward, no, that's fine. Just going forward, we can make that standard. And if there's a function code you're looking at or whatever
I'm
to help,
Page
that'd be awesome.
108, 3110, nutrition service direction.
Thank you.
You can see we had 1.63 FTE in 23-24 and 2.89 FTE in 24-25. And so it's a significant increase, and my concern is feeding children and having high quality food on the plate. So
I have 2 questions to piggyback on that. My first question is, what other administrators are split salary wise into different departments? And then my other question is, can you please show me the page on which that reduction in the current, sorry. So you're currently in human resources, you're currently in finances. Can you show me on which page that department, that was the word I was looking for, shows that reduction? I'm sorry, I could not think of the word department.
Okay, so on page 58, under 2521 fiscal service direction, you'll see my reduction in the 0.3. The other 0.1 of mine is out of transportation. And then if we look at page 57, Office of the Superintendent, under function 2321, only 0.2% of Scott is charged to nutrition. So that is the 0.2 reduction. There's 0.2 reduction there, and then on his HR is a 0.2 on page 66 under function 2640. So he's split between HR, deputy superintendent, and nutrition.
What's the advantage of splitting it up like that?
I think the biggest advantage with this one is that we have a requirement from ODE to have a certain level of education or an admin license in charge and overseeing the nutrition department. And so he was the only person that was available with that administrator license that could fill that position.
Totally get that. And yes, it needs an administrator above it. Does ODE require that to be reflective within our budget?
Which part?
Do they just need to know who the administrator is of the program, or do they need to be able to look at our budget and say, we know this is the administrator salary?
Right. I don't think that they necessarily need to know that, as long as it's documented that that person oversees nutrition,
Okay, so then why did we change it?
because it is an allowable cost.
Thank you.
Another area in the budget. Oh, sorry.
So, and just forgive me this question. The cost of having a superintendent, assistant superintendent be the administrator for that program must be much higher than what we've previously paid for, and like their salaries are different. So I would think that that's a significant cost to the program when you have an assistant superintendent level position being the person that's doing the food services.
So there is a slight increase in having Mr. Lindenberger, a portion of Mr. Lindenberger's salary, and having Tina's salary in nutrition. When you compare it to the last person who was in that position as director status, who had the qualifications that we didn't need to have two positions. There is a very slight increase, but it is not a significant increase in the cost.
I also asked about the decrease in budget for oil and gas for our vehicle operation service. It went from 250,000 to 50,000. And I asked what changes in student transportation would allow for this kind of savings, and Heather had some great news on that too.
Yeah, so this past year, the Newburgh-Dundee Public Schools signed a contract with the city of Newburgh that allowed us to use their wholesale fuel at their cost, which has kept us underneath the cap for fuel costs for our transportation service. So they extended that contract with Newburgh Dundee Public Schools to our transportation provider. So our buses are allowed to use that. And then the bus pays the city for the cost of the fuel that they use. And we don't see a charge for that until it hits above $4 per gallon.
And that was on page 64. My apologies.
Yes, we also have an agreement with the city where they provide routine maintenance on our smaller vehicles, not on any of the buses, but like on our trucks and stuff like that. They'll do oil changes for nothing but the cost of parts.
I have a general question. I don't know if it's allowed or not. Coming back to the breakout of administrators and the costs and where they're coming from, can we get like a side report maybe next time of saying all administrators and within the DO and where their budget's coming from and like how it's allocated, maybe the code of, whatever their code is, 40%, another code, 20, whatever.
Absolutely. I can
Okay.
get that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to wait until the next meeting, or would you prefer that I email that out to everybody so that you have that? Because I can send that out tomorrow. It's super easy to get.
However and whenever you would like to would be awesome. So
Okay. Yep, I'm happy to do that. And when you say administrators, do you want just in the district office administrators, or do you want like our CSPT and our principals and assistant principals and all the directors?
let's do them all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have just make sure I'm not talking over anyone else. Okay, page 113. Question about the capital projects. When I hear the description of what the person is doing in the bond fund with a function 2633 public information services, I question if that isn't more of a project management role that should be rolled up into the 4,000 costs of the building rather than usually public information service is more of a communication function. And so when my question was originally, as the bond fund is going down, why are we spending more on communications in the bond fund and less in general fund when it looks like the needs are going the opposite direction? But now I'm understanding it's more of a project management. And I'm wondering about the coding of where it's being put in the budget document.
Yes, and I definitely think that's something that could easily be moved to the 4150 function code, because for the incoming maintenance administrator or facilities administrator that will be overseeing the remainder of the bond projects, it is more of a oversight. There is a 0.5 FTE of our communications specialist that is funded in that 2633 function. So part of that FTE of the 0.5, it's not 0.5, 0.25 is our communication specialist for doing all of the announcements and news related to our new projects and ongoing projects. So a portion of her is budgeted in that as well. 0.7 of that will fall off on September 30th.
So in terms of communication services for the district, I see 0.25 in general fund. How much is communication being paid from bond funds?
So in the current year, we had that position as a 1.0. It's only budgeted to continue at a 0.5. So it will be 0.25 general fund and 0.25 will stay in the bond fund.
So you'll have a half-time communication specialist
Yes.
with a half in general fund, half in bond
Yes.
fund. Thank you.
Yes.
So do I understand that correctly? That communication specialist is just gonna be half-time employee, not full-time?
Correct. That is what we have proposed.
Okay.
I just have a general, I'm seeing some of these abbreviated codes. What is CONF/SUPR space salary? I'm assuming SAL salary. What does that mean?
Can you tell me where you're looking?
That's everywhere, under 1291, 2131, under 2633.
That's
There's,
confidential.
oh, it's confidential. And what's
Confidential
super,
supervisor.
okay, thank you. See, this is all I need. We need like a
Good.
glossary.
Can I go back to the bond question? So, 0.25 will be under construction, but then construction's done next year.
The major construction is done. We'll still be working on smaller projects as well.
So would you continue to keep them in there after that, even if they're just little projects, or because that wouldn't fall under employee, what you were saying earlier, Claire, right?
So one of the things that, when I look at it is how much of their time is being spent on bond-related communication
Mhm.
and how much of their time is being spent on day-to-day general operations. So, with the bond winding down, is it truly 50-50 when there is, so much more going on in the general operations? That's probably the question that you're trying to ask. Maybe. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It is, and if it's not, then we probably shouldn't keep it in bond. Because that would be against the bond guidelines and policies. My question in regards to bond, because it came up last year also about bond and how some of the finances of the bond was used. Do we have somebody guiding us on bond policies and rules?
So yes, we are using a Cornerstone as a management company who are managing the funds in that bond and tracking the expenditures, making sure that they're coded to the correct projects and making sure that all of the projects that are being done are within the bond ask that was sent out and promised to the public during when they were first advertising for the bond. And then I would like to address maybe part of your concern with leaving the 0.25 of communications. We have a major project that will be completed that will require a lot of work with the Dundee School project that will be completed. And since this position is being reduced down to a 0.5%, we anticipate a lot of work needing to be done around the new Dundee School opening and getting word out on that. There's also several projects that will be completed relating to roof structures that the community has dealt with leaking in the auditorium for years and years and years. And we really want to be able to continue to highlight those things that the bond is continuing to pay for. So while it may not be that for the entire year, she spends, half her time doing bond and then the other half doing general fund. It may be that for the first half of next year, she's doing primarily bond work. And then the last half of the year, she's doing primarily general work. So I do understand your concern and do we need to continue to fund that in the bond? I do feel like the 0.25 would be very well justified, at least for the next year.
Thank you. I should clarify. Next year, I totally understand it. It was the year after that I was.
For 25, 26?
Yes.
Yes, we wouldn't continue to,
Okay.
we would move that position.
Sorry, I did not clarify that earlier.
That's fine. Yeah.
I don't want to cut anyone off. I'm really skipping a lot of questions. I know that it's hard to believe, but I am. Because I'm getting responses. So, on page 115, the construction excise tax, I noticed that, $550,000 was budgeted under the 2544 maintenance and 322 repair and maintenance services. And when I, read the statute that authorizes the CET, it says that it is not allowable to spend on operating costs or routine maintenance costs. So I suggested that might it be building improvements in more of 4,000 function and a 500 object rather than at in an area that is, by the statute isn't allowed. So, and Heather, you have a response to
Yeah,
that?
so my response was that was total oversight on my part. And I remember looking at that and thinking I needed to change it and I didn't get it changed. So I will make that correction.
Yeah.
And when we have the final budget that will be approved, that change will be in there. So in addition to the maintenance was the transportation building acquisition. And my thought is that we will just move both of those expenses into the 4150 function code, which is for capital projects, and move them to a 520 object code. So I will make that change. That was total oversight on my part.
Well, budgets are complicated and there's never enough time to do them as well as we would like. So
Yes.
that's one of the reasons you have a budget committee so that we can look through it and ask you
Yep.
lots of questions. So appreciate your candor there. Go ahead.
So I'm noticing the time, it's almost 7:40. Either a break or another 10 minutes of questions and then moving on. And then we can look at the budget again individually and come back with more questions. What would you like? You're all tired.
I'm sorry, can you explain that second part again?
Yeah.
Doing 10 more
So
minutes?
we can take a break for 10 minutes, or we can say we're gonna do 10 more minutes of questions, gonna end questions, finish the rest of the agenda. Then we can go and look at the budget more in depth and come back again. So what's left on the agenda is public comments, adjourn. I think we might have one. Or we can continue.
Keep going.
Okay, that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
Sure, I would just saw some glassy eyes.
I guess to clarify that, budget chair, I know we're all kind of, I mean, you two have kind of done a lot of your questions. I have a list of questions too, so.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's fine. I want to make sure that I didn't know what the normal.
The normal is just to ask them out, and I totally respect anybody else who has more questions. I was just doing a temperature check.
Okay. Well, and some of this could be just because some of us are new to this, and so there's like the CONF code, right? The glossary that I made earlier. Some of these already been answered just because we had you're saying, I think, well, I don't know. Now I got moved because it's got it. Hold on one second. It was originally page 19. Now I have to clarify. It is still page 19. I see a reduction in migrant education grant of 123,000. Roughly. Do we know what the impact will be for that? Because I know that is a very successful program over the last several years.
Yeah, so this has probably its largest impact on the Welcome Center. But our funding from WESD for Title III was reduced. And they eliminated a position that we were not able to fill. So that's essentially one full person that will no longer be funded. We've moved a lot of those expenses into the regular general fund so that we can continue to have a successful program. Jillian Felizarta, our Director of Curriculum and Learning, she has done a phenomenal job at looking at her program and seeing how her resources are being used. And so there's cuts to the Migrant Summer School program as well as part of that funding. So yes, that was a WESD cut.
Oh, thank you. Next question should be easy answer. I think it's now over pages 22 and 24. We have a student body funds, and then we have a new student body funds new. Can you explain why? And I know this isn't necessarily super regulated under you know, and we've had previous discussions about this too, but just why is it two different categories now?
Yeah, so part of the reason, the 204 fund was initially used as a flow through. So if the student body accounts needed to purchase something on a district credit card or a P card, they would put in a PO, they would put it to Fund 204. The district would bill the student body funds for it, and it was a flow through account. But then at the end of the year, the auditors would give them journal entries that would record total expenditures and total revenues for that fund. Since we are moving those student body funds into the district-wide accounting system, we thought it would be much nicer to have a clean fund to start with. Now, that being said, there are a couple of errors in Fund 208 on your revenue. The very first one being the beginning fund balance. It should not be a beginning fund balance. It should be a transfer. So there should be a transfer scheduled out of 204 for the money that for the student body accounts to transfer into the new fund. Because it's a brand new fund for next year, there is no beginning fund balance. So that was another site that when Claire asked me all of her questions that I came across that one because of a question she asked very similar.
Okay.
So our thought process was the high school is going to continue on their own accounting system for the next year while we get everybody else situated and moved over to the new accounting system, and then we'll move the high school over. So our hope is that for the 25-26 school year, we will have one transaction out of there, which will be a transfer for the high school student body funds.
So essentially 208 is going to be everything except high school for next year. And then 204 is everybody else
Yes,
for now. And then going forward, everything's 208.
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question real quick
Yes.
about that. So when it goes to a district wide, is it still going to be, I guess, identified by school, or is, okay,
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
we still have the same accounting principles where that money will be tracked by center. And it just provides us the ability to oversee their financial transactions. Right now, we have some that use QuickBooks, some that use Quicken, some that use Blue Bear, some that do them on spreadsheets, and it's very hard to have an oversight of that. So it will be nice to be able to, when they have questions or they can't make their bank statement balance, that we can just jump online and look at it with them and be able to help them through that process. So that's kind of just being more accountable for our student body funds and how they're spent is our goal there. And while we're on that topic, though, I just want to point out to you that the Fund 209 for Tiger Manufacturing, that is another issue. It shouldn't have a beginning fund balance. It should also be a transfer. So I will be making those corrections in the adopted one because they're brand new funds. They can't have a beginning fund balance. So I'll make those corrections as well.
Thank you. I still have a list. Is anybody else? I don't
Go ahead.
want to monopolize. Okay. This may be again, maybe more the educational part of it is, why are we, and again, it seems like the first couple years of actuals had it broken down of like all the benefits, like health, dental, vision, and then now it's all being under like a lump sum of benefits. Was there a reason we did that change? And that's pretty much everything under salaries. Anybody that's a salary plus benefits, it's
So under the benefits, what you're looking at is the contractual benefits, which is their insurance. We don't always know what they're going to pick for dental or health insurance or how much they're going to use. So what we do is we budget the max cap for the employees and we put it all in one lump sum. When we report to ODE, once that breakdown rolls up to that major function or major object. So when you look at the 240, and you're seeing contractual benefit obligation, that is our health insurance. But when we track that throughout the year, we tend to break that out in what does dental cost and what does that actual health insurance cost. So it's just an accounting breakdown that we do throughout the year. But when we roll up, it rolls up to that budgeted 240 account.
okay. So going forward, after the couple years drop off, we're not going to see the breakdown. We're just going to see the 240 line item only.
You'll still
Going
see
forward.
the actuals because the actuals
Oh,
will
okay.
report. Yeah. That's
Because
why
it's
you're
adopted
seeing-
and proposed. I
Yep,
get it.
yep.
Never mind. Thank you.
Mhm.
25-21 fiscal services direction. Oh, okay, this is a comparison again. We have a 25-21 fiscal services direction and a 25-25 financial account services. Which is on 59 and 60, I believe. Can you explain what, to me, they kind of sound the same. What is the difference of those two?
Would you say those numbers again really quick?
25-21 on page 59 and then 25-25. They basically both start on 59. The end of 25-25 is on page 60.
So the fiscal services direction is primarily, you're looking at like my salary, my cost, and then what I use to run the department with. And then when we get into the financial account services, that is more of our Becky Brenner, who does accounts payable, Nancy, who does our coordinator of finance, and then Naomi, who does payroll.
Okay. I'm sorry, I did start at the very bottom of 58 for the actual salary, so.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I have another list on the backside here. Let me just target a couple, get some other ones just off I'll send an email. 2140, it was page 44. I don't know if that's it anymore. 2140. Sorry, I'm jumping around just a little bit. Oh, it's actually page 52. Psychological services. It looks like we are reducing or cutting that whole line item or salary at least.
Under 2142?
2140. Well, I'm sorry. It starts on 51, but it's 2140. We had adopted 117,000. Looks like it's mainly salary plus the benefits and other stuff. But then proposed this year is 0. So are we cutting a position? What are we doing? What was that?
It was moved to SIA for mental health supports.
Okay. Does anybody, and I know we talked about this when Jillian presented this probably. What's the likelihood of that always being available for funding that position?
I think SIA is a pretty stable fund. While we might see fluctuations where we get a little bit more one year and a little bit less the next year, or we might see a little bit of a decline over a couple of years, I think that money is pretty stable as far as what the district will get. And I think most people feel that money is pretty stable.
It's funded by corporate activity tax, and so as long as the economy is doing well in the state, it's pretty strong funding. It's when we have a recession that it would be a difficult time where the resources could go down. Although there are reserves at the state level that they've built up over the last, 20 years that would carry us through most any kind of recession we have at this point.
Yeah. Just
I'd also say that it is common to fund positions out of the SIA fund because it is pretty consistent.
Right, okay, thank you. 2160, function 2160, page 53. I see an increase in salary. Well, hold on, am I getting the right note? 21. Yeah, I'm sorry, 2160, other student treatment service. There was an increase, actually, yes, if you look kind of just the sum, there was an increase of $110,000, $111,000. Is that just an increase of FTEs or
Yes.
what's happening?
Yep, so this is an increase. We're actually looking to hire a second occupational therapist. And while the district itself doesn't need an occupational therapist for a full 1 FTE, we do have a smaller neighboring district that is wanting to contract us services for 2 days out of the week. So we're able to hire at a 1 FTE and provide a full-time job to somebody, but get reimbursed for some of those expenses as well. So
And
that is why you see the increase in approximately 1 FTE is to hire an extra occupational therapist.
are they used for the higher disability population? What are we using an occupational therapist for?
Yeah, it's mostly special ed.
Most of them, sorry, can I
Yeah,
jump in?
yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Most of them are special ed in their consultation. So if there's any student with a fine motor issue or a large motor issue, and then they'll come in and they'll do an assessment or an evaluation and then do a consultation and provide some services, like they could provide a slant board for a student so that they write at a slant because of how their fine motor is. Or they could provide a weighted vest or blanket for a student just for that sensory.
Okay, thank you.
And also I will add to that is that last year we only had one FTE, but we also contracted with a private individual to provide additional services because we had more work than one FTE would cover, which is another reason why it was easy for us to increase hiring one FTE, especially when we could get reimbursed from a neighboring district for part of their time.
Okay, this is my last question.
Yes.
2240, which is on the bottom of page 55, instructional staff development. What is the purpose of that funds? And I see that it was cut. Well, at least the tuition part, well, pretty much everything was. We had adopted 100,000, now we have 0. So what is that for?
Well, that is a good error that you just found. And I need to add $100,000 back to that budget.
Okay,
Because that is for the licensed employees tuition reimbursement. It should not be classified as a 200 series. It probably should be in a 300, but we will be adding that back in. So thank you for pointing that out.
Okay,
I
good.
didn't realize that we missed that.
I have a follow-up question on that. If we're adding in 100,000 to this one, does it have to come out of somewhere else
It does.
over the overall budget then?
Yes.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. It's hard to catch all those things.
I had a question. Claire, you had some more things that you sent out to the budget committee. Are you going to wait
So-
on those or?
So I think we're getting written responses for them, and so when they're completed, we'll send it out. Would you be willing to send it out to
Yes,
the budget
absolutely.
committee? Great, thank you.
Yeah, and I will say that having Claire look at it, it was very helpful because Claire has a very good understanding of how budget codes work and what the legalities are of using certain codes. So she was able to find a few things that we need to tighten up in the budget, and I will be making those changes. And I will note it on that question form that she sent out, which ones I will be fixing in the budget document so that you're all aware of that fix going forward. So again, I thank you, Claire, for sending those questions.
And I think that it might, because we're discussing something that the whole committee is looking at, that we need to post that publicly as well when it's ready.
Yep.
For public meeting laws, I think that would be probably the best practice.
Just for clarification, a question I have is, it sounds like communication is going to be instead of full-time, half-time. And I know that you said about 10 elementary teachers probably reductions. Do you want to explain, other anticipated, a reduction in force or RIFs or?
Sure.
So at the district office, we anticipate losing 5.5 FTE. And then currently at the elementary, it's approximately 10 certified members, teachers.
For all elementary together.
Correct. Correct. And that puts us at that 20.5 average at the elementary. Our middle schools and COA and Catalyst have together, we kind of treated them together, but they've lost, I believe it was help me out, 0.5 certified and half certified, and I think 1.2 classified. Is that right? Or was it 1.7 classified? Yeah. So Co and Catalyst was a little bit of both. And then the high school and the middle schools, so far they've gotten off pretty good. They haven't lost a whole lot. We did a little bit of reductions through Jillian Filizarta and the teaching and learning department with our EL program and dual language as it transitions up through high school. But I think, well, I know what we attempted to do was right size the district, and the primary cuts came from elementary, as I've already talked about, and then the district office. Like I said, the district office was 5.5 FTE is what we're proposing.
It's a loaded question, and it's not one to be answered this year. How many of our elementary schools have a population under 200?
2. Well, 3.
Have we considered combining schools? And I know there's so many heartfelt thoughts in that. And when we have 3 that are below 200, and I know some of those schools are built for 400 to 500 students, it gives me pause.
Yes, we've definitely talked about that internally. And as you, I think you're alluding to, those are no fun conversations. Another thought we've had is Mabel Rush is pretty big, and it shares a boundary with JA, and JA is one of our smaller ones, is maybe do a boundary adjustment to loads, offload some. Ewing Young's unique because it's kind of out there by itself. Dundee's definitely unique, and it's getting a new building soon. What we're being told about Dundee is that a lot of the land around the new Dundee Elementary is going to be developed as soon as the building's up. So hopefully they're priced accordingly so young families can get into them. But yeah, we talk about it. But it's becoming reality too. So
Is there anticipated additional development in Newburgh?
there actually is right across from JA, but once again, if they come in at 600,000, our young family is going to be able to move into them.
There's slated development.
I have a question, wanting to go back to the PERS discussion earlier. And Nancy, what you shared about the OSBA numbers. So is there a process in the district when we start getting PERS forecasts that costs are going up? Is that started in the conversation, or does the district get any idea from PERS as to, in 18 months or 2 years, we're going to see this percentage of increase? Or are they just annoyingly vague, leaving us to try and figure out the math on our own?
So I can touch on that. One of the great resources that we have, her name is Carol Samuels, and she is like a PERS guru. So she sits on numerous boards, and anytime that there's any changes or even thinks there's going to be any changes, she emails out detailed information about every potential PERS change and how it could affect districts, and helps promote lobbying. So I anticipate that she will have, since there's no slated changes for this next fiscal year, I anticipate that probably towards the end of this summer, Carol will start reporting on where the actuals have come in, or where they're projecting their actuals to come in on the PERS investments, to see where we're at, and that will determine what our rates are. I would anticipate probably maybe January of this next year, that they will start announcing what kind of increase districts can be looking at for the following year with a lot of certainty that those are going to happen. So,
I have a question about just these like FTE cuts, especially for the elementary schools. Like Joanne Austin, 3 FTE is leaving. I just added 3 FTE in instruction, 1.35 FTE to classified instruction support. And I'm thinking about that and then the spending versus outcomes. And like Joanne Austin is the bottom right quadrant. I just wonder if it's just, do we have a plan to make sure that they're getting good instruction still, even though we have to right size these classes? It feels worrisome that some of the other ones aren't losing that kind of FTE necessarily, but it's happening at the school that maybe needs the most support. Obviously, those numbers are outdated, but I'm just.
right. And I think it's important to note that Joanne Austin has had the largest decrease in students district-wide. So proportionately, and they've been relatively overstaffed. They had some very small classrooms. And that is, we've kind of let that go, hoping to make a difference, that it is one of our title schools. So there are some funding concerns with that as well, but I think still being able to keep their class sizes relatively small. My hope is that as we adopt this new curriculum, with the math and then the ELA and then the science and the health, that we'll see improvements in those assessment scores district-wide. We've also been working on it really hard for the last 2 years. That's a primary focus of ours. And I think we're seeing those numbers coming up district-wide. So while I think it shows you a great snapshot of a point in time on that chart, I might be hard pressed to say that that's where we're still at today.
I think you just have a little typo under this form that says under Edwards, under number 6, electricity increases from 45,000 to 1,100,000.
I checked the budget earlier. It is 110,000.
Empty commas.
Yeah, no, that's a
Okay.
typo. So yeah, should be 110,000.
So going back to what Kat had said earlier about the schools and the enrollments, aren't enrollments kind of down across the country, and this trails back more to a birth rates? So are we commingling our hopes that the new construction for homes will be priced for people moving in, but yet they aren't having families? Because I think I remember we had gotten some data years back saying the people moving in aren't coming with kids. They're done with that and they're looking for quality of life. So I worry a little bit that we're hoping those numbers will go up in schools with lower numbers, but the reality of it is that's probably not going to happen for anybody, and we aren't unique. Am I close or not?
I think you're pretty close. I will say though, that when you bring in affordable housing, families tend to follow. So if we can focus some of our new growth into affordable housing for families, we will see families coming in here because they'll be pushed out of other communities that they can't afford to live in. So and granted, it's not going to be exceptional. We're not going to get, 5,000 kids or anything like that. But if we could recuperate some of that loss just by having affordable housing, Newburgh is one of the more expensive places to live, which is a deterrent for families with small children because kids are expensive too.
I will say, we took the April 1st student count for this year. I suppose I could have updated it with May, but it wouldn't have changed much. And I took K through 5 and I added them all together. And then I took 7 through 12 and added them all together. I left the 6th grade out just because I wanted 6 grades and 6 grades. And the K5 kid count was 1,704. And the 712 was 1,899. So 200 kids. So we're top heavy, and every year you're going to have a senior class leave and a kindergarten come in. And if these numbers maintain, it's 40 or 50 kids. It'd be much better to be the other way around, but we're not right now. And yeah, so it's the projection. For instance, we have 288 seniors this year, and we have 242 kindergartners. So that's 46 kids. And if the kindergarten stays the same, which, it's 46 kids next year that we'll lose.
I have a follow-up question on that. Are you able to send out the cohort kind of breakdown so we can kind of see for each grade levels how many students we have, so that we can kind of see that graph of,
I can send that out.
Like, let's find out for sure what you want. You want, let's say, a sheet that shows every elementary by every grade. And so you see Edwards has 72 kindergartens or 85, is that what you'd like, or something more detailed?
Sure. I mean, previous reports have shown just district wide, but if you have it by school, I think that would also help us kind of see, what's the makeup of each of the schools. And then as, you could have the total as well, which would be great. You can kind of see where the kids are moving up the grades. So again, like, you have a large senior class and a smaller kindergarten class. We can kind of see, do we have a bubble coming? Things
Sure.
like that.
And can I see that? So this is the sheet I was referring to that I shared with Nancy the other day. It's really simple, and we can give you more, but this is the kindergarten 242, first grade 291, and then as we go down 301, 280, 304, 286, 290. So there's only 2 that are in the 300s, and it's a 301 and a 304, so barely. And then you get into 7th grade, 309, 302, 348, 330, 322, and then 288. That's district wide. Now we can get you that. That's easy. I can make a copy of it, but we could also get you something that's school specific.
Yeah, if that can be sent out, then we can all kind of look at the same thing.
Yep.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Can I add to that request? It's kind of a little geeky-ish thing, but let's use 5th grade as an example. Those, and I know this is not comparing apples to apples, but those that the enrollment rate in their kindergarten year, and then their 1st grade year, and then their 2nd grade year, and their 3rd grade year, to look for a trend. Are we dropping consistently per year, or is there, like, when they get to the 5th grade, there's a bigger drop? So I'm looking for linear cohort enrollment. So a 10-year-old across their span of education here. I know that's a big ask.
I
So
don't,
think about it.
I don't
but-
know if it is, because we've got someone, Tanya, that does work like that.
Okay,
for us
does that make
straight.
sense
Yes.
what I'm asking for though?
Yep.
Okay.
Of like 4 years. 4 years.
I do have a question about the 22, 23 actuals. Are these the audited numbers?
Yes.
Okay, so these ones are the final one. Okay. And then my understanding is that there's going to be accounting software technology change coming up. Where is that in here?
Okay, so I can find the page really quick on that. So can I email that information to you just because I know that it's broken down in several places? So what we're looking at doing is replacing several programs with one program. And because we were a pilot program for the state of Oregon, we were able to obtain that software at less of a price than what we were paying for just our accounting software previously. So it's an overall savings to the district because it's not going to be as expensive, but because it includes so many pieces, it's broken out into multiple different parts. So I can email you what that breakdown is for it so that you can see and I can also email you what was previously budgeted and spent for that.
Robert, I was wondering if there's a way we could before, because it's looking like we're getting the next meeting. Whether we could get like a simplified breakdown like we've had in the past that has what our, proposed expenditures and incomes and our EFBs are for the last, what our 4 years that are on here. So like just a sheet that's,
Just one sheet that has all that information.
yeah, because A, print tiny, B, I mean, I'm not going through and adding everything up. I haven't got that kind of time. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to say before, Kat says, has more comments that as a new board member, I really appreciate all the expertise here of the citizens who've worked on the budgets before and having Claire here who has a lot of experience and it's just been really helpful. And thank you for all of your insights and kind of the historical nature. I think that institutional history is really important, especially to this board. So thank you so much.
Yes. Any more questions? Do you want to look at it for a few more minutes to see if questions arrive, or should we go to public comment? Okay, public comment? Can you come on up to the podium, please? Thanks.
I'm Shannon Kaplan. I'm the speech pathologist over at Edwards Elementary School. And so I just wanted to give you guys a face to the name. But I wanted to ask the committee, and I thank you, Jeremy, for asking for a page number and category for those at home that might be following along online that don't have that in front of them. And it was helpful for me too to follow along. And for the great questions, I thought they were just really awesome. But I have a question and more of a concern about recruitment and retention of current employees. We've got an excellent dual language program at Edwards Elementary, as you guys know. But unfortunately, a lot of our EAs that are Spanish speaking are not given a Spanish stipend for that, a Spanish speaking stipend. And so I'm wondering if we can look at that in the budget for the next few years, possibly. Because I use their services a lot as an English speaking SLP. I can't reach families without a good interpreter. And I know we use Zoraida a lot from the district office, but it would be nice to have a dedicated interpreter or EAs that are dedicated to do that, to provide those families that service. And then also we have it makes me a little on edge when I hear that we're going to be cutting staff members at the elementary school because the face of the classrooms at Edwards are different than possibly a lot of you realize. These kids that are coming in, kindergartners, we have 8 kindergartners that basically need a one-on-one. But they're going to be put into a classroom of 20 peers with 1 kindergarten teacher and no support because it's the least restricted environment. But then I question, their peers are now in a least restrictive environment because now this child is taking all of the teacher's attention. And so the education really isn't happening there. It's more of a guardianship. And so I'm hoping that that is looked at in the next year, especially with a couple of the kinder teachers that are pretty much maxed. And so this is where I'm looking at retention. How can we support these teachers and retain these good teachers when they're already maxed? There was another question, it's probably not that pertinent now, but those are the most how can we support, how can our vision and mission be supported by our finances? Having our vision and our mission, our focus and our finances supported rather than our focus on the finances and then having our focus falling short. And so I just thank you, board members, for listening and budget committee for listening, but just kind of wanted to give you the face of, I mean, you see it on paper, but I kind of want to give you a face for facing at the largest elementary school in the district. So, and this is the foundational of our students' career, and so that they can come out of elementary school strong, then it sets them up for a good next few years before graduation. So thinking I'm a little biased, but I think that's where we need to focus a lot of our attentions on the elementary schools. But if you have any questions, I'd be glad to shoulder them, but that's just what I'm seeing. I'm only 2nd year into education, and so that's just what I'm seeing with eyes wide shut. So thank you. Yeah, thank you.
I do have a follow-up question with that. Do we still have the translation services with all the meetings?
So our board policy is we offer translation services when it's requested. If it's requested, we absolutely provide it. When it's not requested, we don't.
And I believe it's 72 hours.
I can't recall, but the requests go through Tabitha and she handles it. But before I got here for years, it was provided and it was rarely taken advantage of. And so the company actually contacted us at the district office and said, you're paying a lot of money for us and we're rarely translating. And so we went to policy, which is when requested, we provide.
Can I clarify on that? Translate or interpret? It's okay.
Interpret is what I was answering.
And then.
Was
did
your
you mean
question
or
translate?
Interpret.
Honestly, I don't know what I meant because I've seen at previous meetings through like the Zoom or you can change the sound to listen to the person that's speaking in Spanish. So I just didn't know.
Tomatoes, I think, actually. Well, I mean, yes and no, but when you meant meetings and when you referred to meetings, are we talking about district meetings or are we talking about building meetings like IEPs that they have to request an interpreter?
No, I'm referring to district board meetings and budget meetings and et cetera.
Thank you.
Yeah, we still have interpreters in the buildings.
I did find the policy for board meetings. We will do interpreter for within 48 hours notice for hearing impaired persons and 5 working days for translation services for any other language.
From a point of just education, general education, inside of education, are stipends a normal consideration for somebody that is bilingual?
We have some positions that are posted as this position needs to be bilingual. And if it's posted as such, then they receive a stipend. Other positions aren't posted that way. And if a candidate applies and they're bilingual, there's not a stipend attached. If a classified employee feels like they're being taken advantage of, they're not receiving a stipend, and a lot of their time is used speaking Spanish, then they would approach their union leadership, and their union leadership would approach us at our monthly meeting and talk to us about that.
Just as a follow-up to that, is there a testing that is done for candidates that present themselves as a bilingual candidate for a bilingual recruitment? And are they tested to a certain level of proficiency?
That's a great question. I assume so, but I've never been through that.
Actually, I can answer that question. Yes, they are tested. I don't know at what level, but this question came up recently. And it was through Teaching and Learning. They advised me that there is an actual test that they have to take to be considered bilingual, because they have to meet certain requirements for that interpretation or translation services. So there is a test. I don't know at what level there is, but they do have to pass that test in order to qualify for it.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, there is a meeting scheduled for May 21st. Was that our optional meeting?
No, May 21st, so we've already published notice for it. So it will be coming out in the paper and it's posted on our website. The 28th, I believe, was our optional third meeting if we needed it. So we may go ahead and send that notice to the paper as well, just in case we do need it, so that we make sure we hit the timelines for posting.
Okay,
So,
because I don't think we'll decide on that until after our next meeting.
right. Yeah. I
Okay.
anticipated at least needing the next meeting, and that if we need another one, we've got it kind of set aside. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
I really appreciate all the hard work you've put into this.
Thank you.
Okay, if there is nothing else, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 8:25. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.